All right, everybody. My name is Rohan Patel. I work here at the White House Council on Environmental Quality, doing environmental, energy, climate outreach to many different groups, including folks here in the room today. I want to welcome folks that are watching on whitehouse.gov. Welcome all the folks that are here in the room who have come from a long ways off in some cases, traversing some pretty horrible weather to get here today. So I want to thank everybody for making the time, both online, but certainly those that came here through a lot of tough weather. First, just want to say we're here at this event to talk about weatherization driving technological innovation in the home performance industry. But weatherization does so much more. It has huge impacts on energy savings, obviously, for homeowners, huge impacts on job creation and economic opportunity, and it's a great community development tool as well. And so the stories that we're going to hear today are just phenomenal, and we hope that using the White House and having this event here will lift up some of those stories. We just want to urge all of those folks that are watching online, community groups, those in the audience, to amplify these stories as much as is humanly possible, whether that's through social media, that's through local op-eds and the like. So with that, let me just quickly introduce Brad Penny. Brad is the General Counsel at the National Association for State Community Service Programs. And Brad has been really leading the effort, both in the administration on the Hill to secure funding for this vital program. And Brad is a graduate of Cornell Law and has been had plenty of experience on the Hill, I think up to 15 years on the Hill, and is a good friend to this administration. Brad?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. I just want to offer a few words of welcome on behalf of NASCASP. Our Executive Director, Tim Warfield, is driving at this moment from York, Pennsylvania. As many of you know who probably went through some similar transportation difficulties just getting here today, this has been a tough couple of days weather-wise. Tim will be here, and we'll certainly ask him to say a few words when he arrives. But there's one person in the audience that I particularly want to call out because he drove here last night from the state of Maine. A huge shout-out for Rick Card, driving from Maine. All right. My family is originally from Maine. I know what that's all about, so I know what a huge deal that is, Rick, and we sincerely appreciate it. We also really appreciate Rohan and Franz and everyone who has worked, particularly want to call out Franz, who's worked very, very hard in putting this program together. This is going to be a very, very strong program. We are very excited to have this opportunity at NASCASP. We're certainly grateful to Dr. Danielson and Dr. Hogan. And we're very, very pleased to be able to bring you the story of weatherization. This is a great program that produces so many different benefits, which unfortunately have been overlooked. And that's why this is so significant to have the opportunity to tell that story of energy efficiency, of jobs created, of the weatherization supply chain. You'll hear all about that today, new technologies, and hopefully this will lead us to a successful effort to preserve funding for this great program. With that, I'd like to introduce one of our strong champions. It's a great pleasure to work, as always, with Dr. Hogan. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'm certainly pleased to be here today to moderate the first panel, which you might note is titled Weatherization, Gateway to the Home Performance Industry and Best Practices. I think many of us are familiar with the large number of low-income homes weatherized through this program and the billions in energy savings for low-income families. That totals about $16 billion for the 1.6 million families served since 2009, and we're also familiar with all the jobs that have been created. But from this panel, what you're going to hear is how the weatherization program is helping to train the weatherization workforce and develop and spread best practices throughout the weatherization network to the benefit of the low-income families and beyond. The WAP has a long history leading the development and spreading of best practices, like the blower door, say this 5 times real fast, like blower door-based air sealing, sidewall dense pack insulation, ASHRAE 62.2 implementation, and the use of infrared cameras for quality improvement. And most recently, the WAP has led the development of new guidelines for home energy professionals, which is a suite of resources including work quality specifications, training program accreditation, and certification for workers, which all together will provide consumers, investors, and service providers with the confidence of an industry standard for quality. Let's just look a little more closely at these things. The workforce specifications represent the first industry-developed national guidelines for performing high-quality energy retrofit work, and they form the backbone for updated training for energy efficiency professionals, a new training program accreditations, and it's offered through the WAP training centers, which provide training to the entire home energy retrofit workforce. Again, not just to the WAP providers. Already, as we look across the country, 14 centers have been accredited and another 10 are in the queue. The standards are also the backbone to home energy professional certifications, which are the first ANSI-accredited professional certifications available to the home energy upgrade industry and represent the gold standard for professionalism in WAP and the greater home energy upgrade market. And these are soon to be integrated into the work of the Weatherization program. I just wanted to go through those recent accomplishments to give you a sense of this gateway of the Weatherization program, and now we'll move to our panel who will share a variety of their experiences from the places that they come. So first we will start with Steve Cowell, CEO of Conservation Services Group. Steve founded Conservation Services Group in 1984 and is the organization's chairman and CEO. Under Steve's leadership, CSG has designed and implemented conservation and renewable energy programs for utilities, state agencies, and other groups throughout the U.S., providing services to more than 3 million businesses and households. And Steve has also been the founder and director of numerous energy efficiency and renewable energy organizations during his career. So we're very pleased to have Steve with us today. Next, we have Mark Jackson, Vice President of Energy Solutions Research and Training, Community Housing Partners out of Christiansburg, Virginia. Mark joined CHP Energy Solutions in 2009 after 19 years in business management. He oversees all operations of the CHP Energy Solutions program. That includes training at facilities, on site, partner relations, marketing, scheduling, and much, much more. We're delighted to have Mark with us today as well. Third is Rick Karg, CEO of RJ Karg Associates out of, as you heard, Maine, and that would be Bethel, Maine. Rick is trained as an economist and was a building contractor for 10 years and is now the president of RJ Karg Associates and Residential Energy Dynamics, LLC. He's been working with weatherization and home performance programs and electric and gas utilities for 30 years as an educator and consultant. He's a member of the ASHRAE 62.2 Committee and the Maine Technical Building Codes and Standards Advisory Board, serving as the editorial advisor for Home Energy Magazine, and has offered numerous weatherization standards for various states and programs. So let's start with Steve Cowell.
All right, I'm going to speak from here. Does everyone hear me? Okay. Thank you, Dr. Hogan. It's been a pleasure working with you for many years. I just want to give a little bit of and many people have my remarks already in advance. I'll try to work off of them and not necessarily just read them. But from a personal perspective, this program, the Weatherization Assistance Program, was the legacy of so much that we've been able to do at Conservation Services Group, that I've been able to do personally, that it really is a very deep commitment. The history, just a personal history, is in 1979, I was the community organizer-in-chief of the state of Massachusetts. Believe it, there was a position called the community organizer-in-chief of the state of Massachusetts. And my contacts in the Carter administration, the Arab oil embargo hit in 1979. The country was getting walloped with energy prices. It was devastating. They called me up and said, Steve, we are in trouble. The country's in, can you figure out something to do to move us forward and try to fight back. So I walked down the hall to my friends. The next agency down was the Weatherization Program. And they taught me about this conservation stuff, about air sealing, insulation, low cost, no cost, ways in which people can take control of their energy costs. And they said, you know, we've been working at this for now 3 years, and, you know, we think it would be great if you could get the message out. So being a community worker, I work with community action agencies. Ran a state volunteer. I was the coordinator of the Vistas in the state. So we picked out a city, one city, and in 12 weeks, 85% of the residents went to a workshop on how to save energy. And it was a new experience. We had the banks, the schools, the mayors, poor people, the whole community got united around the issue. We got to fight back from high energy prices. And as a community organizer, getting an issue that can get everyone together was just awe-inspiring. And I said, wow, this is an issue that can change foreign policy, it can change equity, it can change so many things. Let's do it together. And so actually, after that first one, the state of Massachusetts gave me $4 million and said, do it everywhere. And so we worked in collaboration with every weatherization program in the state and every community action agency to mobilize over 250,000 people the next year. And we got together that winter and said, this is just awe-inspiring. We were able to work together, you know, rich and poor, to really make a difference. And we said, what can we do to make this permanent? We can create a nonprofit corporation that can lead the charge and get non-low income and low income to work the weatherization program and the CAP agencies. And out of that weekend, we decided to form Conservation Services Group. It took us a couple years to figure out how to get the money, but in '84 we incorporated, and we've been working on that ever since. That strategy of low-income and non-low-income community-wide efforts to address our energy problem house by house has really built over the years, and I've been proud to be part of it. It could not happen. The basic intellectual precedent of how do you address a home, that was started with this program. And luckily, we've been able to work hand in glove in every state. We work in 25 states, and everywhere we work, we try to work hand in glove with the low-income program, right? It's a partnership, and that partnership has been effective. And a little quote that I'd like to say in terms of what this has meant. Just in the last 3 years, this program has taken off. 1 million homes weatherized. On average, we did a program in Maine, on average, 40% reduction in energy costs. They have really old housing, and it's really cold there, as Rich will tell you. But in the last 3 years, tremendous progress has been made through this program, just in the sheer numbers, the learning centers that have been created to refine the program, the effort and the technical approach, recruited contractors. Contractors from all over the country are getting involved in the low-income weatherization program and our programs as well. So frequently they'll work, and many of those contractors are here today, and some are in the audience, because this is a small business program. It mobilizes small businesses to make a difference. We're advancing the technical skills, and we can't stop. The work that Dr. Hogan mentioned about coming up with strategies to improve certification and training, and many of the folks here have been working on that, but we're doing a tremendous job. New strides have been taken, and I guess from the point of view of looking into the future, if you look at the strides that have been made across the communities to address the issue of how we get our housing costs under control, energy is number one. During the Homestar effort that I was the head of the Homestar initiative, and we did the research and found that energy prices were the thing that threw our home mortgage crisis. That's what caused the home energy crisis, is the 3-year rise in energy prices. We can stop that. That is something that we can have an effort on and have an impact. That's the future, right? Given the success of this program, technically, collaboration, communication, and work across our communities, we're just getting started. Granted, it's been here a long time, but we have a lot of work to do. And now is not the time to ramp that work down. Now is the time to keep that work going. And it is the core of what we do every day, and it's the core of what a lot of people in this room do. And I know these guys are going to talk a lot about some more technical, but I like to keep it on the high level of macro impacts on our economy, and CSG would not be here if it wasn't for the folks like Rick and others who really, and Elliot Jacobson and John Wells, who are from ABCD and Action in Gloucester, were the co-founders and co-incorporators of CSG. So literally, we would not be here if it wasn't for the people who ran the Weatherization program. So, with that,
We'll turn it over to Mark.
All right. We're going to go ahead and queue up a PowerPoint here. So before I start today, it is a sincere pleasure to be here today to speak to everyone. I also want to take a moment to say thank you. We talk about collaboration. Steve mentions partnerships. Weatherization is full of partnerships and networks. I have some great partners that I've had the last few years. Virginia Department of Housing and Community Development, actually Willie Fobbs, who's going to be one of our moderators today. Also utility partnerships, AEP, Dominion Virginia Power, Washington Gas, Columbia Gas, ExxonMobil, all great partners of weatherization in our state and our area. So what we're going to do is make sure our clicker works here. There we go. So let's take a look at weatherization from the past, if you can see this up here. If we take a little look on the left here, does anyone know what that is? That's back from the 70s. And that was actually putting together an interior storm window. You can imagine today walking into someone's house saying, we're putting an interior storm window into your house, ma'am. And then on the right there, of course, you see some of the first blower door testing that we were doing. So we looked at a lot of individual measures back then. As Anthony Cox, who's one of my building scientists, says, we caulked anything that didn't move. So weatherization now, if you take a look, we look at advanced diagnostic tools and techniques. You can see obviously the modern day blower door there on the left, a bolometer in the upper right-hand corner, the lower left-hand corner, lead-safe weatherization. Something we probably didn't do a great job of back in the early 70s, but we do a lot of training around health and safety for our workers also and the occupants. Infrared, how do you actually see through the walls of a house? Great technology we use today. And again, all that is around house as a system. If you've never heard that concept before, we look at the house, the building as a system, all those components working together and how they interact with each other. So weatherization helps set the bar for the standards for the residential energy efficiency, retrofit, and home performance industry by developing the Home Energy Professionals Project. We also call it HEP. There's a little bit of what Dr. Hogan talked about. So we went after looking at a few things in the Home Energy Professionals Project. Standard work specifications, the job task analysis for each of the positions, certification, as we talked about, credentialing the workers, and important to me, as a training center director, accrediting training centers across the country. So let's take a look at those. Defining the work, the standard work specifications. First, the standard work specifications had to define minimal acceptable outcomes for any weatherization or home performance task to be effective, durable, and safe. Next, we looked at validating the training. The job task analysis for the 4 major energy upgrade job classifications define what a worker needs to know and do. And those classifications are the retrofit installer technician. As we joke about in our training center, that's the cash for caulkers. That's the person going around caulking everything that moves, right? But they know a whole lot more now than they did back in the 70s. The crew leader, the energy auditor, and the quality control inspector. And they went to certify those workers. The certification blueprints synthesize the content of the SWS, the standard work specifications, and the JTAs to lay out a roadmap for robust worker certifications. Now, I emphasize robust. This is not basic, entry-level, I understand some building science, robust credentials. We wanted nationally recognized industry credentials that are portable and transferable between public and private sectors. Very, very important. So we kind of came up with developing in our state especially the Home Energy Professional Career Ladder for our weatherization teams and crews. Starting off at the retrofit installer tech, working your way to becoming a crew leader, then on to energy auditor, and finally the quality control inspector, which is near and dear to our heart at Weatherization, is making sure that every job is 100% correct. Next, we looked at accreditation. DOE partnered with the Interstate Renewable Energy Council to develop the accreditation standards. As Dr. Hogan mentioned, we actually have 14 centers across the country fully accredited this time, and another 10 in the pipeline to deliver weatherization training for all 4 of these credentials. The idea was to drive consistency across the country, to raise the bar nationally for quality retrofits and training. So what are we working on now? Well, there's probably too many things to mention. There's a lot of folks out there working on weatherization, dreaming up new ways and better ways to build a better mousetrap and better weatherize a home. One of the big ones right now is a multifamily initiative. We were trying to provide new resources for improved energy upgrades to buildings, multifamily buildings. So again, we're looking at standard work specifications, job task analysis, and important multifamily energy audit tools, MULTIA as we call it. So we really could diagnose a multifamily building properly. We're also looking at new and improved methods and partnerships that stretch WAP dollars to maximize benefits to more clients. That's where those partnerships with utility programs and other programs within your state are important. So, weatherization's commitment. Our commitment is to build and renovate healthier, safer, more durable and energy efficient homes with a greater return on our investment. Provide better consistency and benefits for clients, consumers, and funders. Prescribe a national standard of quality for the home performance and retrofit workforce. And help our country conserve its resources while lessening our dependence on outside sources of energy. Again, I thank you for the time today. I'll be available, obviously, like everyone else afterwards, but I'd like to turn things over to Mr. Karg.
Thank you, Mark. Is that applause for Mark or is it for me, since I go next?
It was for partnership.
For partnership. All right.
Partnership.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Dr. Hogan, thank you for your introduction. I'm delighted to be here. I want to say just a bit more about the trials of getting here. My wife and I left Maine. We tried to leave Maine yesterday at 5 o'clock on a flight that was delayed and delayed, finally canceled because of the weather here. Then we got a hold of our daughter and decided that she could drive us down to Boston. We're starting out of Portland, Maine. Drive us down to Boston. We could catch an Amtrak train and get here that way. Well, after driving about 50 miles, and finally I was able to get into reservations on the web in the car, found that there weren't any. So we turned around, dropped our daughter off, and turned around again, and headed down here last night, leaving about 7, and got here this morning. And it took us a lot of effort, and the final piece of the story is we got to the security gate, and my wife realized her license was back in the car 2.5 miles away. So she's not here yet. But I hope she gets here.
She's here. She's here.
She's here, all right. There's my wife. Leslie made it. And I would not have been able to be here without her. So, and the reason I tell the story is because I deeply believe this program is worth the effort. This is a wonderful program. It has been since the beginning, and it only gets better as time goes on. I have the best part, I think, of this to talk about, and that is the technology. I love it. How has the program advanced the technology? As my colleagues have already mentioned here, that it really is, the program is the backbone of the residential energy sector. I am old enough to have been around during the Residential Conservation Service program. I know there are some others in this room that remember that program. And that program was a national energy program. And the weatherization program, low-income weatherization program, precedes that. You all know, of course, where the weatherization program began, don't you? Maine. The state of Maine. Maine has already had quite a bit of mention. There's one more. State of Maine in 1977. It was the first organized residential program in the country, and others have been modeled after it. It really set the standard, and it continues to do so. With the ups and downs of the economy and funding, it has been the one program that has been consistent, it has stayed there, and it has sustained the rest of the industry. We have seen in Maine, with various utility programs going up and down with funding, contractors moving in and out of the industry, but the weatherization program remains and sustains. It's created a market for private business that otherwise would not be there. And as for Steve mentioning his business, I've got a couple of businesses that are sustained and were made possible by the low-income weatherization program. I'll say more about that. I'm going to read these bullets to you. It took me a long time to put these together. They're bullets, but it's actually a long sentence. And you'll see that the sentences become longer and longer as we go through this. In the beginning, 1977 to approximately 1990. I'm not exactly sure, but things have changed gradually as we've gone along with technology and methods. But in the beginning, a bit of insulation and a tube of caulk installed by part-time, often untrained workers. Some of you remember this. We didn't have much to go on. The information has been developed as time has gone on, and weatherization, I think, in my opinion, is the cutting edge of the fostering of that information. Today, what do we have now in weatherization? Only cost-effective measures are installed by certified professionals with a keen awareness of safety, using cutting-edge diagnostic equipment and procedures and advanced software. So it has fostered equipment, technology, software, methods, and many other things in the field that there's a very good chance they would not be there without the low-income program. The future of weatherization: established procedures used to select cost-effective and safe measures based on fine-tuned energy modeling and diagnostic software installed by certified professionals, as Mark just talked about, having credentials transferable among states and programs, a very important characteristic of what's going on with certification. People certified within the weatherization program will be able to get jobs elsewhere because their certifications will be transferable. Economically, this is a really big step and a step toward professionalism in the industry. I mentioned it's provided a sustaining structure. It's been a catalyst for home performance and demand-side management programs. Very important. I ran with Greg Thomas, who's here, a program in Maine, the Maine Home Performance Program, very much based on the low-income weatherization program. It's the springboard of innovation. It has been for decades now. It fosters building science. Mark mentioned the house as a system. Building science is something that the weatherization program has pushed forward. We've developed diagnostic procedures that perhaps would not otherwise be there. For example, something that's rather complex, zone pressure diagnostics, which allows us to pinpoint where leaks are in a building and disaggregate the leakage of a house. The program has set standards for health and safety. I'll mention more about this. and it's advancing professionalism. A few more details about the innovation and the impact on the larger industry that continues today for equipment. And many of you know this, many of you are involved with the program that are here. Blower doors, which it's a great term. It's easy to stumble on that term sometimes. I do it often. They actually started as blower windows, but it was discovered that the size of doors are much more uniform, so a blower door would be better. A blower door is merely a way to discover how leaky a house is. Installed in a door, it has a big fan in it. Digital pressure gauges are another piece of equipment that have benefited from the weatherization program. Duct testers for testing the leakage in furnace ductwork. Infrared scanning, which has already been mentioned, which allows us to see what's in a wall. Software. I have developed software. My company would not exist without the weatherization program. There's Greg. Treat is another software. Hancock Energy is another. Many companies out there now in the energy business would not be there, I dare say, without the low-income weatherization program. Diagnostic procedures, zone pressure diagnostics is one. There are many others. Cost-effective air sealing guidelines, for example. Installation methods. The low-income program has advanced the methods of dense pack insulation, which not only gives us a good insulating value, but also stops air leakage. Health and safety protocols are very important. Carbon monoxide testing and combustion safety testing are two of the most notable. And by the way, I heard a few hours ago that many of these procedures are now being transferred to some countries in South America. The birth of standardization, which Mark mentioned some characteristics of. We are standardizing procedures. It has spawned the home performance business. It has had an influence on professional organizations. So there's a great deal happening here, and I'll mention some more about that. Mark showed many photos of some of these techniques. Here are some more. Various manufacturers, blower doors, combustion safety testing, duct testers. There is much out there, and there will be more. I'm just scratching the surface. And finally, two things that are close to me. Residential Energy Dynamics, a company that I started with someone else, that would not be with us today if it were not for low-income weatherization. It's free to the people using it. They give us feedback. We find out what they need. We try to give them what they need. And we hope that it is assisting programs out there. There are about a dozen states now using it. And another, finally, is on the cover of the standard there is the ASHRAE 62.2 standard. It's a ventilation standard that the Department of Energy has adopted for the low-income weatherization program. I want you to know, as a member of that committee, that the low-income program has significantly influenced the character of this standard. There's a special appendix for existing homes. There is now an effort being undertaken at the upcoming meeting of this committee to look at the issue of multifamily housing and perhaps combine two of the ASHRAE standards having to do with ventilation. Again, this is because of the low-income program. Very influential. Thank you.
So now I believe we have some time for comment, or for questions of the panel. So anybody would like to ask a question? Yes.
Hi, my name is Barb Shepherd with Neighborhood Centers in Houston, Texas. And I'm seeing a change, possibly, and I'm looking for everyone's opinion about using software such as Leap, Treat, that's what we've been focused on in our state, versus using a priority system. And we have both of those active in the state right now, depending on the funding source. And I just was wondering if there is an opinion or other people are seeing a preference one towards the other.
I'll do a quick response, which is really a very definitive, it depends. Okay? It depends really on what your objective is and whether you need to quantify more precisely the results for a variety of purposes around public policy and things like in parts of the region, some of the savings can be sent into the capacity markets or the carbon mitigation RGGI market. So it really depends on what level of precision you want to use. Software helps achieve that, but also priority lists are important as long as the person using the priority list is trained and certified and has the skill set to deliver the services appropriately.
Good answer.
All right, they agree with
Good
me.
answer. I defer.
Fellow.
Yeah, hi, Joe Bowen from Margaret Community Corporation, Far Rockaway Buildings, the Association of Energy Affordability in New York City. We kind of danced around it a little bit with the health and safety issues, the importance of that weatherization. No one's really gone down the road towards the way low-income weatherization is leading to an overall holistic, healthy home movement within this country. Anything like that? You deal with that?
Do you want to do that? I can.
Go ahead.
I'll let you, Rick.
You're the
All right. First of all, that question is beyond the scope of this panel. But we'll try.
It's that Maine humor, I think.
Yes, it's down.
That's Maine
Down
humor,
east.
yes. I think that's the fourth time Maine's been mentioned. Yes, indeed, and I think that this is a trend that will continue. I'm very glad you brought it up. It's very important looking at things holistically. The house is a system, and that includes the health and safety. And looking at it holistically, we have a long way to go, for example, with air quality. And we are not there yet, but there is much to do, and the ASHRAE standard is looking at these kinds of things, the ASHRAE committee. But there are so many of the pieces already that are in the assembly of that very complex problem. I think we're really moving in that direction, although I think it will take more time to do so. And there's the trade-off of money. Do we use the money to save energy? Do we use it for health and safety? That, I think, will always be there, and perhaps will become more difficult as time goes on.
Kara?
Hi, Kara Solarali, Efficiency First and the National Performance Council. I have a question about the advanced meters that we've been seeing on homes across the country. One, a real question about if they're hearing on single-family homes, including low-income families. Has that been helpful in having that data, and is weatherization program utilizing that data to better understand home energy use and the effects of the weatherization that happens, the retrofit? So you mentioned the selling and capacity market and having data, and I wanted to
That's a tough one because, at least so far, I think we are way underutilizing the data that's available. It's scratching the surface. It's there. It is not being used adequately. And therefore, that is going to be a challenge, not just for the low-income weatherization program, but for all of us who care about home energy usage, tapping that data to actually get us a better sense sooner. Before we walk into the house, we're just beginning to do it and trying to take that and be able to say, before we get into the front door, we got a much better sense of the needs of the home, in which case we can go faster, better, quicker in terms of serving the customers. But we are just beginning that data is just beginning to be available. So I really think it's an underutilized resource.
And I think we can say with confidence that metered data is more reliable than modeled data. And this is metered data that's now right in front of us in many places. And I think it is underutilized, and all of you that are out there in the field, program managers, I think the time has come to try to use this and integrate it into our programs, especially for baseload measures.
Another good example of why we can't stop doing what we're doing.
Yes.
Yeah, Dave Hubbardsall from AEA, Association of Veterans Programs. I think another issue that's implicit, Sandy was, for us, climate action plan has been tied to resilience, and clearly weatherization as an infrastructure gives us an opportunity to really address not only a whole building, but the perspective of climate change and resiliency. I'm just wondering, has there at DOE been an attempt to begin to make that connection to a massive infrastructure that we have that goes out into housing, the building stock of America, to really connect that? I know some of us are forced to in New York because it is such a critical issue. Is there a way we can begin to see a weatherization connection with resilience?
Sounds like that's a question for Dr. Hogan.
I did say DOE.
It's a DOE.
Certainly, we're trying to connect those dots at the Department of Energy, but I think, again, we're sort of putting the right people together to start the conversation. I think we did put out some guidelines recently with HUD that tried to link some of the dots between financing and resiliency as we looked at some of the older housing stock, a little bit more in the multifamily world. But there, again, is a lot more to be done in that space.
I'd just like to say a comment on the question around occupant health and safety. It goes right alongside the resiliency question, and looking at some of the beginning work on monetization of benefits, that the health and resilience benefits are equal to or greater than the economic benefits, which is something that really we're just beginning to understand.
So I'm glad you mentioned Matt differentiating with rebuilding together. I'm glad you mentioned health and safety. Measuring those is a key step. But sort of bringing it towards Maine and thinking about partnerships, as so many seniors have been wanting to stay in, have you started to see technology driven with respect to some of the aging in place initiatives, and do you see partnerships and opportunities as a society as a whole ages? Is that an opportunity for some technological changes that can help people stay healthy and safe in their homes in addition to staying comfortable in their climate?
The people listening in can't hear the questions. So the question that we now have is about health and safety, and really with an emphasis on our aging population and whether there's an opportunity in the services that the Weatherization Network delivers to bring, I guess, technology into the building that can help people stay safe and comfortable in their homes as they age in their homes, in addition to sort of the typical weatherization aspects.
I think we're just beginning on that. I mean, for example, some of the new thermostat technology and being integrated in with smoke detectors and infrared scan and Wi-Fi built into those technologies in terms of the ability to know what's going on even when you're not there and monitor what's going on in the house for the consumer to have a better sense. So the control technologies are beginning to be integrated into alarm systems. And I think that the next step is really early warning systems on health and safety. So the answer is we're just beginning that, but luckily technology is going to give us some real tools to make that possible. We just have to put them to good use, and we have to keep the vehicle in place to be able to turn those new technologies into sustainable strategies. That's what we got to do, and that's what this program has done, and it needs to keep doing it together.
I have a question. I'd just like to say, first of all, my name is William Rice, Restoration Corporation, representing Brooklyn. And I'd just like to say, as was stated already, that this trip they came a long way. From 1981 to now, it's been some rough days, but they came a long way. And I would like to say also that last
Thank you.
And that was really a call out for geothermal systems and solar thermal systems being put in place in Brooklyn, and the opportunity to do a lot more of that based on the availability of funding.
One thing I wanted to point out, if I could, just a moment, just to talking to a couple of questions around like the modeling software needs, MIAs. One of the things our organization's also doing is actually starting to meter our own buildings. Actually, Community Housing Partners is primarily a housing nonprofit, and we have about 6,000 rental units that we own and manage. And with that, we're also partnering up and answer the challenge that DOE put out, the Better Buildings Challenge around multifamily and big building portfolios to lessen our energy burden by 20% over the next 10 years. So we're not only modeling through Portfolio Manager and other programs what's going to happen when we do actually energy conservation measures, but we're starting to meter those so that we can also go back and make sure that the modeling actually matches exactly what's happening in the building and with the clients. We talk about healthy homes. A big part of healthy homes also is education and training for the clients. You know, we actually work a lot with our resident services folks to actually teach our residents how to live in their homes. We talk about indoor air quality and ASHRAE. It's great to tighten our buildings and then ventilate. So we talk about build them tight, ventilate them right. But it's also very important to teach residents how to use their house as a system now, because without that education, unfortunately, sometimes they don't operate those systems, those houses healthy. So,
Terrific. Well, I think that brings this panel to an end. As our panelists have said, as they've gone through their talks, they will be available at the end here to answer more questions if you have them. So let's thank our panelists from Maine, Massachusetts, and Virginia.
Sorry, actually, pardon, I'm sorry to do this, but we actually do have a little bit more time for a couple more questions. So the resounding applause, I think, is always welcome, but sorry to interject, but
All right.
please go ahead.
We're going to do the young lady there, and then we'll come back to you.
Good afternoon. My name is Siobhan White. This is an organization called the Environmental Justice. And I've done a lot of research with seniors, particularly here in Detroit, in low-income housing and specifically around extreme heat, sometimes with climate change and developments in brought before. And one of the challenges that individual seniors that use the weatherization program because the structure of their home is really unsuitable. So I would love to hear your thoughts about how to kind of overcome, because that is the population with a lot of our aging cities, and with climate, not going anywhere to change, it would be great to hear what are some solutions that we might be able to offer, what we can advocate for to make these homes that are sometimes unsafe spaces to take care of our most vulnerable populations.
Okay, so the question is focused on the challenges that the weatherization program does face when homes have sort of structural issues that bring forth safety problems, and how that impacts, in particular, our senior community. So what is it that we can be doing in the weatherization program, potentially with modifications that could start to address some of these issues?
Well, when we go into homes, and whether it's low income or non-low income, the reality is that it doesn't matter what your income is. If your home isn't safe, if it's not designed to meet your needs, then the programs all need to step up the game to being able to see things like code violations, safety violations as part of the communication with the consumer. Not just I'm insulating your attic, but hey, that front step is really rotten out, and it's just a problem, right? So we need to expand the scope of what we look for, not necessarily to change everything, but to get better education and communication on a broader range of housing needs than just energy efficiency. Sometimes it's the opportunity to get in the door. Granted, we're there for a very specific purpose, and sometimes that means we're just the technicians just doing their job with the infrared scan, et cetera. But we can see a lot more, and I completely agree with particularly the other comment about an aging population.
The other thing I would point out also, if that's all right, is, as you probably know already, and I talked about myself, is partnerships, collaborations with other organizations. In our state, one of the programs we use is emergency home repair. And sometimes that program has to partner and marry up with other programs like weatherization. And there are other organizations out there that can help bring funds to the table. Obviously, those funds are not unlimited. But as Steve would say, a lot of those organizations, you need to help with stepping up with funding to help in these situations, especially with our aging population.
And I'll add two to that, if I may. May I, Dr. Hogan?
I think it's time for us to wrap up. So we really can continue this conversation.
Okay.
I know I promised him twice, but
Go, yeah.
is it really, really quick?
It is quick. This is a spectacularly successful program. It's been a catalyst for new technology. It's very, very sophisticated. It has shockingly low budget numbers. And I hope that the members of Congress are watching this. I want to thank the Department of Energy. I want to thank the White House. How, as a community, do we rally to make sure that the weatherization program is getting the proper funding that it deserves? For every dollar invested in weatherization, we're getting almost $3 in return. We need to work together to make sure that this program gets the funding it deserves.
Educate. Educate. Right? You got to know the numbers and you got to talk about them, not just keep them in your file folder.
Thank you. One more round for our panel, and we'll turn it over.